Hey, MBA hopefuls, we are live on the air with MBA Waves talking all things business and education. Before we get started, I'm going to remind everyone to give us a like and subscribe because it helps us to continue to create all this free content on MBA Waves. Today on episode 138, we're talking all about round one applications and how to prepare. And we're going to get into some of the trends we saw in 2023 versus what we anticipate for this year in 2024. What are your chances of getting in for round one in 2024 and what the AdComs are telling us to watch out for. This week, I'm your host, Eric Lucrezia, joined by my co-host, Bara Sapir, and we're joined by special guest, sorry for that ringing, special guest from Chicago booth and full-time admissions consultant, David Petersam. Hi, everyone.
Hello, great to see you all.
Hello, guys.
And funnily enough, we just came out of the AGAC conference this year. For you guys who don't know AGAC, this is the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants. We just had our annual conference in Barcelona and in Paris, France. And Bara is actually here right now for the first time broadcasting from my own apartment in another room. And so the conference was awesome. I just want to give a quick shout out to our hosts, which were ESA Business School in Barcelona. And we also got to meet Esade in Spain, and here in France, we were hosted by HEC and ESA, and it was fantastic. And shifting gears, it is also Pride Month, so I'm going to give a shout out to that one too. But let's just get right started with our questions. David, as you're our guest, we'll let you answer first, then we might just jump in and
Sure.
answer. You are a Chicago booth alum. You started your admissions consulting firm soon after you graduated. So, as a consultant, you're in the front lines of candidates applying to business school. Mm-hmm. Start us off. Why don't you share with our listeners and people watching in the audience on YouTube how the business school application round system functions?
Sure. So if an applicant is fully ready to apply for the first round, oftentimes in the ideal world, more times than not, we're going to encourage them apply in the first round if they're ready to go. A few reasons they may not want to apply in the first round, even if they otherwise have time. Maybe they need to work on their standardized test score. The pendulum swinging back to now we're putting the COVID far further into the past, hopefully, knock on wood. Mm-hmm. There's resurgence in the importance of standardized testing. Another reason we've had applicants who are ready to apply in first round, we've told them to hold off if they think they may be lined up for a good promotion. If they haven't had a lot of career progression, they think, hey, I think this is going to happen. Let's hold off, cross our fingers, hope to get that promotion, that new title, that new responsibility, and we'll just rewrite your essays and as necessary and apply in round two. Roll the dice, if you will. So there's not necessarily a best round for everyone to apply in, but overall, Eric and Bara, most of the time, if they can apply in round one, by all means. If your application's ready to go, you've got everything lined up the way you need to, apply in round one. We've had a few instances over the years where someone's worried about losing a job. And if that happened, we want to rush that application in so we can put their position to current time in terms of their resume. So a lot of things to consider. But overall, the earlier you apply, again, overall, the better off it is. As the rounds progress, they're looking at the demographics. They're looking at trying to check all the boxes. They make offers as they make offers, but the yield, the percent of people who accept versus of those that got offered, it's not always perfect. So they can get into the last round and say, wow, we've made offers to people on the West Coast, but none of them, very few have accepted them. They don't want to get the reputation that they don't accept applicants from the West Coast. So round three, they're going to lean heavily on that geographic region. Or maybe they just didn't get a lot of liberal art undergrads for any number of reasons. So they're going to look a little bit harder there. So the longer you wait, sometimes a bit of a luck element creeps into it. Mm-hmm. And in the perfect world, let's take the luck element out. Because if you have well-prepared applications, then you really don't need luck. And it seems to me that luck's more likely to work against you.
Yeah, I fully agree. If you can apply in round one, it's definitely the best option if you're fully prepared and have a well thought out and fleshed out application. But what comes to mind, you mentioned luck, and I would some people define luck as when preparation meets opportunity, right? And I would just harp more on the preparation part of it. In the sense that with so many variables that can change, like you mentioned, losing a job or a promotion, which are kind of like two opposite things that can influence your timing. So the best thing you can do to be nimble and agile in the face of change that you cannot always predict is to be as prepared as possible. And the way to do that is to start early. When I'm working with my clients, I don't know about you, David, how soon before the deadline you tend to pick them up. But for me, the earlier, the better. If I can help them navigate the research process and the reflection of like, who am I? What do I want to do? Where do I want to be, and then really have that time built in to prepare the GMAT, which I'm going to ask Bara about in a second, or GRE or EA is another exam that more and more schools are accepting. You have time on your side to have as many things in place as possible to allow you to respond to change, which is inevitable. So,
listening to both of you, it's reminding me how you can put your best foot forward, but there's other people and there's other situations on the other side. The adcoms are the ones that are thinking about, like you said, David, like, is this a liberal arts, heavy class? Is this an engineering heavy class? Right. So the only thing that each of the applicants can do essentially is bring their best foot forward each and every time. And, not you hopefully are only going to be doing round one, but there are times when people apply for another round, right? If they don't get in or they're waitlisted. So can either of you tell me, is there any disadvantage for applying in round one?
Only if you're not prepared. Again, if you're prepared, you don't have to worry about it being, if you're an engineer in round three, and it's turning out to be a very engineering heavy class. If that's the case, you're out of luck. So again, usually applying earlier and try to eliminate that luck factor. And luck happens to everybody, Eric, and I agree with you there. But we can control as many things as possible. Let's do it and let's get in early. And it also usually shows more interest in the school. If you're applying late, they may think you're not the first choice, and would he even accept the offer if we make it? And how happy a student would this person be at our campus if he or she ends up coming here?
Yeah, absolutely. And lining yourself up or with that right timing and to end up being able to successfully apply during round one. And when I successfully, I don't mean getting admitted, because you don't know that, right, until you go through the various steps. But I mean successfully in the sense that you've really prepared the best application possible with a competitive GMAT score and so forth. With all the distractions we have in life, especially when you're a working young professional, you may have, partner, kids, parents to take care of, mortgage and so forth, not to mention the personal life. What are some of your tips or suggestions on how to best stick to applying to round one when that's your goal?
We work with them. If necessary, we'll follow up with them. We can set up a timeline to encourage them. If we get an early start, we have plenty of time to work through, as you talked about, discovering their wow factors and choosing their personal story themes, deciding what we want to write about for each essay, and then we just try to keep them on track. If they get stuck with the writing, they can always call us to discuss things. I'm sure you're the same way, Eric. It usually starts off predominantly via telephony. Hey, I've got these three ideas. Which one do you like best? Well, A and B are pretty good, but I really like C because it highlights leadership and initiative, for instance. Oh, well, David, if you want to talk about that, maybe we should talk about the project I led last spring. Okay, tell me about that project. Here's why I like this even more. So we try to identify the things, talk them through, tell them what we're looking for. And again, they send us a draft, this, we get it back to them. And while we're looking at it, their eyes are freshening. So when they see it again, they're ready to go. And again, sometimes we create timelines, just depends on the applicant. A lot of them would be like, I don't need a timeline. I can do this. I'm self-motivated. But everybody's different. We don't judge anybody. And if somebody wants a timeline about, we have to be on the third draft of this essay by this point or whatever it is, we can certainly do that. And we have done that.
I mean, I don't see somebody using a timeline as lack of self-motivation. I think it's just about structure, whether it's they themselves who create their timeline or it's you guys who give it. Because of all the experience you and I have working with applicants each year, we kind of have a good idea of how long things might take. And and factoring in some of the variables and surprises that may come up that they might not have thought of. So a timeline or a roadmap or a deadline list is a checklist, I think, is really essential in terms of, like, I think it's probably the best way you can stay just on track for applying for round one or any round that you're targeting. All right. If there's anything else, besides anything else that you might want to mention, I wanted to think about last year. What did we learn from last year? What did you see, hear, or learn from schools or from former clients or people that you might have talked to in 2003 that are good lessons that would impact folks this year?
The schools have not even come close to hitting saturation point for artificial intelligence. If you can potentially use AI in your application, it may be your strongest suit. They're not even close there. Again, I have nothing against crypto or some of the other things that have kind of come up, but AI is a big one. All the schools are looking to bring in students that have experience in that particular sector.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, that's probably the biggest change as well, connected to AI. I remember Feb 2023, that's when ChatGPT went viral, right? Everyone was like, wow, what's this thing? And like experimenting with it. Same with DALL-E 2, both are products of OpenAI. Okay, great. And so, some schools, I don't mean business schools necessarily, high schools, colleges around the world took a really hard stance again at like banning it, right? And I think, at least what I thought was, there was a conspicuous silence among the top business schools, not taking a position so quickly, wanting to see how things would play out, maybe not wanting to end up on the wrong side of history or having a fear-based response. And what I was seeing starting in the summer last year was, one by one, these top business schools that people are targeting, particularly in the States and in Europe, were starting to take this more open approach, acknowledging the tool is there. It's very hard to regulate it, even encouraging their applicants to use AI. But here's the thing: it can never be a copy-paste job, right? I remember one of the directors of admissions for the American schools, she had said for her, AI was authentic individuality, right? And so what she meant was using it as a tool to perhaps as an accelerator, an idea generator, things to make the job go faster, but it still has to come from you. After all, it is your story. And if you ask ChatGPT, for example, to write me the perfect business school admissions essay, it's going to be impersonal, boring, and it's not going to work for you.
Right. And I'm sorry, Eric, just to clarify, I meant people that have AI backgrounds.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I wasn't talking about using the tool, because I think we all see the clickbait news articles and they're easily identified as AI. So fully agree with, the best creativity still comes from the human brain, but I just meant in that field. A few years ago, if you had any type of crypto themes you could use in your application, you worked maybe part of your crypto, but it wasn't all of your job. It might have been worthwhile to really play that up, because at the time schools were really looking to grow crypto. Mm-hmm. Now, if you have anything to do with AI in terms of your work and your career, if your job has been 1/3 AI and 2/3 marketing, we're probably going to highlight the AI aspect of your job as opposed to the marketing aspect of your job, I suppose. I think that's what I meant to say.
Well, let's talk about them, where both are really relevant points. Absolutely, the tech aspect to one's profile, especially if it's artificial intelligence based, is relatively rare. I mean, one of the challenges that schools face is they don't have enough professors to teach this stuff. And if they do, from one semester to the next, the technology has progressed so much that they have to reinvent their curriculum. So it's very challenging. And I think schools, what I've seen anyway, especially at the PhD level, is like really like showing dollars behind interest to attract people to study that, because they also need people to teach it.
We visited some schools last year for AGAC that it was really interesting. They actually included this as part of their curriculum and the AGAC conference, mm-hmm. right? They actually had classes that were integrated with AI. And we interviewed one of the business schools in Asia that talked about having a crypto course that they were teaching. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was super interesting.
Well, yeah, like David was saying, I was hearing a lot more about crypto 2017, 18, 19, 20, and then post-COVID, it's really repositioned to more about AI. Now, AI is everywhere, and it has been everywhere for a while, just in much more subtler ways. And now it's much more, I suppose, democratized, commercialized, whatever you want to call it, much more present. It's like the public is like sort of woken up, say, oh, it is actually here. This is not some future, fantasy. This is reality, and it's going to become more and more present. But I like this comment I saw actually a couple times over the last few weeks on LinkedIn. It's like, I don't want like AI, to write stories for me and paint pictures. I want AI to like do my laundry and wash the dishes so I can, paint pictures and write stories. And like, yes, that's so right. To take away the more rote tasks, the more, menial and boring things, so we can focus on enjoying life. Or in terms of business, is probably more about being more productive, which actually this post, when I saw it again today, made me think, it's like, email was invented to make communication faster and more efficient, right? Yes. And yet now we're just more plugged in. We're expected to respond to like 150 emails a day. Some people probably much more. I refuse personally. But I'm wondering, like, okay, looking into the future, once the AI tools that have not been invented yet are there and they're making something else more efficient, how many extra tasks additional are we going to be expected to manage, because we have all the tools to do so more quickly, and yet we're still stuck with the same human brain and human limitations?
I suspect it's going to become easier, right? Like just now, remember like Grammarly and these other kinds of voice activated writing, like you had to kind of set it up, and now everything is kind of automated and it's, autocorrect. I wonder if AI is going to become a much more smooth and efficient way of moving through things, because it's going to, it will predict to a certain extent as it learns how we move through things. So that'll certainly be interesting. And even in the output of students, once they're in business school, what is that going to look like?
100%.
And I fully agree with you guys there. I think the schools see that as well. They want to be teaching the courses. They want the students that have the experience that they can start having alum that are getting placed in this industry and really help out. So again, we saw crypto quickly go up and then kind of come down a little bit. AI has not even begun to touch its potential.
Correct.
In terms of business school admissions. So if you work in that area, it's most likely what you want to highlight in your application.
And if you're not working in that area,
last year and now it's going to cool off. It's not cooling off anytime soon.
So sorry to cut you there, David. Excuse me. Right. What I was going to say in response to what you're saying, if you're not yet working in that area, look for opportunities to acquire such experience that will help you get into business school afterwards. If you're working for a large company that has a team or a branch or a department that has more AI, they're using AI, that gives you a chance to dip your toe in the pool and get a little bit more experience under your belt. That's going to be something you can include and should include on your CV or resume, and it will definitely motivate the admissions office to look at you more seriously. And why? Because at the end of the day, business schools want to make sure that you are employable, that you are going to not just survive in the tough classes, but that you're going to become part of this brand and show the world what they produce, right? So you're going to get out there and get a fantastic, high-paying job at a prestigious company where you're happy and earning a good salary, and pays it forward. It's a virtuous circle, right? So it's very much about the attractiveness that you have as a future applicant for a job post MBA. So an AI. A few ticks of AI on your CV is definitely a bonus.
Are there any other trends or changes that you think the job market that are happening in the job market that can impact the candidates as well as AI? Is there anything else that you're seeing impacting them?
Well, we could talk about testing.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting. Like every single test has changed in the past like year. right? Everything has changed. The LSAT is on its way to change, and the GMAT has changed. The EA came on board a while ago, and then the GRE is changing. Okay, we won't even get into SAT and ACT because that's not really relevant here. But certainly those are changes and those are impacting candidates and how they're moving forward with their testing. I mean, we know that the GRE has a bigger market share than it did before, and we know that more schools are accepting the GRE than before. But do you see any changes in the job market itself, like AI, that you think are affecting candidates? I mean, crypto, you say that ship is sort of sailed. I mean, is there politics or anything that you think are?
I don't want to say crypto is sailed. And if someone has a good crypto background, by all means, it could very well be their best ticket in, and it might be what really needs to be highlighted. But the interest isn't continuing to grow exponentially the way it was a few years ago. AI is the new super hot thing. And even if you only have a little bit of experience with it, your company got involved and you're able to only get on one little project tangential to it, that just may be your best story theme because it's literally that red hot right now.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. No, but what Bara was saying regarding testing, there was a lot they were talking about at the AI conference this year. We had GRE on site from ETS. Sorry, I should say we had ETS on site representing the GRE, who also create the TOEFL. Both of those tests changed in the last quarter of last year. And at the same time, GMAC, those who create the GMAT test, changed their exam as well. So there's a lot of interesting trends shifting there. In the data that we were seeing, some schools, they're at parity between the GMAT and the GRE. And that's really interesting because, just a few years ago, maybe it was like 80 or 90% at a lot of schools that were taking the GMAT. And so why are people shifting? And it's kind of, I think it's a very individual question. But as I always advise my clients, I was like, it's to your benefit to check out both exams and see which one makes the most sense to you, where you feel more comfortable and where you're scoring better, for sure. And then the other thing was that the EA, the executive assessment, which is something that also GMAT creates, is designed for executive profiles, usually going for executive MBA programs. And yet more and more schools are on board for accepting that as an alternative to the GMAT. Interestingly enough, I just did some research yesterday looking at what schools are accepting Duolingo instead of the TOEFL or the IELTS, right? So Duolingo had this really interesting opportunity when COVID happened, right? There's always winners and losers, and they had already this online version of their English language proficiency test. And it includes a speaking section where you're recorded on video. Yes, I'm gonna guess it's about 10 minutes. I don't remember exactly. But schools like this because they can see not only how you speak, but also what kind of a speaker or presenter you are, how comfortable you are, how confident, charismatic. And obviously, as a business leader, those qualities are very useful. And last I checked, there weren't any business schools accepting that, but I checked again yesterday, and I found 7 of the top US MBA programs are now accepting Duolingo as a language test. So I feel like the sands continue to shift in the testing world, and I think that's very interesting.
Anything they can do to cast a wider net and attract more applicants without really compromising the quality of their applicant pool and their standards, they're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. To a point, David, because talking to some schools, without naming any names, several of the schools were really hesitant still about whether it's the EA, about Duolingo and so forth. It was really, in their minds, it could, create perceptions that they're easing up on quality or control, you know what I mean, to make sure they have strong students in the class. So the tests you accept, the message communicated about how strong of a program you are. So it's a give and take. It's a little bit of push and pull or back and forth, however you want to describe it, of being flexible to cast the net wider, as you said, and yet maintaining that reputation of prestige and quality that is super important with an MBA. Are we missing anything else in terms of, there was the rankings conversation. That's something that's always, one last point about standardized testing. One of our other colleagues in AGAC who focuses mainly on undergrad and Ivy League schools, she's pointed out that many of the undergraduate programs who went test optional or, waiver or removed the test as a requirement for the undergraduate or university admissions. I think 7 of the 8 Ivy League schools have reinstated it because they've seen the data that there is a correlation between people who don't take or who score poorly that struggle in the courses, and there's some logic to that, right? So standardized testing has been criticized for decades, and COVID was an accelerator, and it went away, and it seems to be back. Which is
it was a really quick. It was a really quick departure, and when that was happening, I was pretty, I was like just waiting for it to come back. Like there was no way that it was going to be gone for good. It's like the only thing on a person's application where they could be compared to other students. And I didn't know how they thought they would get away with having not that one data point. But then again, it is just one data point. So students have to remember that it's not all about the standardized test, but that in itself, it is an important data point that speaks to who they are as compared to all the other test takers. So it is important to spend time working on it. But I do think that certainly does impact applicants. Applicants will be like, oh, this school is, they have 50% GRE, so I'm going to take the GRE because they think it's easier. And then other students are like, well, I'm taking the GMAT because, so people have different reasons for taking the tests. And we always say, well, which do you feel better taking? Which are you doing better on?
So David, looking at this cycle, right, we're 2024 to 2025, right, for September start or even J-term. But anyway, speaking about right now, could you tell us a little about some differences that exist between rounds 1 and 2 versus the other rounds? You touched on this a little bit earlier, but just to go a little bit deeper on some things to consider.
Again, if you're ready and everything's lined up, most of the time it makes sense to apply in round 1. Luck can work with you, can also work against you. If you've done everything right, you've crossed all your T's, you've dotted all your I's, luck's probably going to work against you. You have very well prepared applications. If you're putting it off, if that class ends up being heavy with people with your undergrad major, from your region of the country, the world, whatever it may be, your particular industry sector, you can be out of luck. And we've seen year after year, round 3 applicants sometimes have to be stronger than round 1, depending on the particular bucket they're in. We get a bunch of public accounting applicants, and sometimes round 3 do a little bit better. Well, that school must have been light going into round 3 with CPAs, and maybe the opposite was true for IT or whatever the case may be. But again, the schools are very, very sensitive to having well-rounded classes. You would think that when you make these offers that the yield's going to remain constant, but when you break it down into so many different buckets, invariably there's going to be something that they're going to start looking at and saying, whoa, how come we don't have anyone from, how come we don't have any women from the Southwest or whatever the heck the case may be? And no one wants to get termed as, oh, this school doesn't admit people from, public schools or this region of the world or whatever it may be. So they're very, very, very sensitive to that, and understandably so.
Sure.
What about scholarships? Like, do scholarships have any kind of role in what round a student applies in? Like, is it better to apply in round 1 because there's more financial support in the beginning, or how does that work?
Excellent question. As you know, more and more applicants are getting financial aid. That's been a trend now for quite a while. Not nearly as many pay the sticker price as they did, way back when I started my company in the 1990s. But overall, your best chance for scholarship is going to be by applying early.
For sure. For sure. I mean, there's going to be a limit to how much money's in the pot, right? And so if you have, loads of fantastic candidates applying early on, if the money dries up, it's dried up for that year. So it's another reason to go early. What about as international students? Do you think, is it too risky to apply for round 2, or is round 2 more or less like round 1? What is your take on this? Round 3? So when I say international students, I kind of hate this term, right? Because everyone's international, depending on where you're standing at the moment. But if you're applying from abroad,
for an American school, we even more strongly encourage them to apply early. Don't risk anything with your visas or anything like that. Get everything in early. Most international applicants are going to apply early too. Very few schools have an underrepresentation of international international students in the United States. Again, depending on how they want to slice that bucket, they may have more from this country than that country, but overall, definitely want to apply early. Give yourself plenty of time to, get all your travel documents in order, and you don't want to be waiting too long for that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the visa process can be definitely cumbersome and long. And if you're going for round 3 or the schools that have a round 4, that's tough for an international student. I think 1 or 2 is pretty good. I'm just curious if you had a different take. Do you find much difference between round 1 and round 2?
A little bit, not that much, a little bit. And as you mentioned, Eric, most of the time it's not a problem for internationals. It invariably is going to, it's a factor to consider. And we feel the stress too. It's not just our applicants that feel the stress. We feel the stress right there with them.
Oh, yeah.
The earlier the better, but even more so for internationals.
Yeah, I mean, talking about feeling the stress everywhere along the way. I mean, we're with them at every step of through this journey, and yeah, we feel it. We're excited for their successes, and when things don't work out, man, it's tough. And we're like on the edge of our seats waiting for that decision, especially when it's like a waitlist situation. That's just the worst, right? Like, you're almost there. Come on.
As both of you look at the students that you've had accepted to the different programs, have you noticed any trends that you were surprised about, or maybe they're not trends, maybe it's just maybe some of your students have done a lot of work, like you were talking about liberal arts or engineering or AI or fashion, retail, logistics, whatever. Is there anything that you're surprised worked or that didn't work in those applications?
I'll go first. I don't think anything really surprised us. Mm-hmm. For the most part, we have a pretty good, we try to keep our finger on the pulse of the schools and what's going on, and we talk to various admissions people at these schools. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I think the big one is artificial intelligence. It was very, very hot this year. It is not cooling off. So if your friend who works with you in AI got in, the ship did not pass you yet. Don't worry. You got at least 1 more year, probably multiple years, but definitely going into this year. If we have an applicant with an AI background, most likely we're going to be highlighting the heck out of that.
Mm. What I'll say, learned quite a bit of things, again, to mention this conference that we just came out of. My mind is very much still there. And, several of the major players, right? I'm talking about top 10, top 20 schools out there are making some changes. Adjustments on the essay questions. A few schools are changing questions or giving either more or less flexibility on the questions. Like you may have less choices or more choices. I know some schools are moving from a deadline system, like the typical round 1, 2, and 3 that would usually correspond to roughly September, early October, January, and March, to a rolling admission system. So that's another change. Sometimes you're seeing them change and change back. In response to artificial intelligence concerns about not having authentically written essays, more and more we're seeing the use of video essays. Kira Talent's the major player out there that provides this service to business schools, and I think companies as well, where you can get prompted for a question, you have to answer it in the moment. And some schools are using this in combination with traditionally written essays and interviews. I think it's a fantastic tool because it really, you it shows you how people think on their feet, and you really have to get to the point, which I think is always the first skill that you want to show you have through your CV or resume, like taking your whole career and getting it on one piece of paper, one page. So these kind of shifts I think are very much in response to the market, to the technology, to laws. By the way, in the United States, we had that Supreme Court decision that very much affected how admissions questions they can ask about your race and so forth. So, and schools are very much interested in maintaining and continuously increasing their diversity. As you know, study after study shows that companies are more successful, mitigate loss, and increase profits with diversity in every aspect of diversity, by the way. Business schools understand that as well, not only to create an experience for their students that's more interesting and more thought-provoking, but also to produce MBA grads that are going to correspond to the needs of these companies. And so in the States, as you know, certain questions in the admissions process had to change as reviewed by their own legal teams. They have had to come up with other more creative strategies to sort of guarantee that diversity that they're looking for and that their students deserve. So that's very interesting. So yeah, those are some of the reflections I have about this topic. Well, listen, David, before we wrapped up today, I want to just ask you or Bara, are there any other final advice that you'd like to give to applicants applying for this year, particularly round one?
Start early. Don't waste time. The more time you have to really brainstorm questions, the better. For most of us, it's sort of a function of the passage of time. You know, we can work with applicants and we can start putting, I hope I don't sound manipulative, put some ideas in their head, and then it's just going to pop up organically whenever it does. You just can't say, well, I'm just going to wait till late August. I'm going to give myself 3 hours every night to brainstorm. It doesn't work that way. You know, we'll share some ideas with our applicants, and then all of a sudden, you know, they might be rolling out of bed, they might be getting out of the shower, they might be at a red light, and they have that aha moment. You know, make a note of it, write it down, and you know, again, that's what we really want the applicants to do. Take as much time as you can, even if you don't have a lot of time to really start on it right now, and hopefully have time to at least start on the standardized test piece of it. If you start, you know, if you know what you're supposed to be thinking about, then you're giving yourself more time to really come up with your best topics and your best ideas. And it's going to align you with the best experience. You know, it all comes down to the basic questions. Why do you want to get your MBA? What's the best school for you? You know, where do you see yourself in a few years? So give yourself as much time as you can to really build that solid foundation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm thinking also like authenticity. Seems like last year at AGAC, the AdComs were talking a lot about authenticity, and this year they were talking about authenticity. So I think it also comes back, how do you create a really, you know, an authentic version of yourself in the essays, like not trying to produce something that they want to hear, but presenting who you can be to the schools and what you're going to contribute to the class as a whole. So that authentic, introspective voice seemed to be what I heard.
And it takes time to develop that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
It's one of the best things that I do for my clients is helping them, to, like you said, David, find their voice, right? But also that reflection process and sort of listening to your own story and thinking, that's really interesting. That's something that's going to set me apart. That's something that's going to be unique and you know, contribute to the conversation in the classroom based on my personal perspective, experience, background, and so forth. You know, what I will just add to everything that you said that was already fantastic is stay away from the blogs, Reddit, and so forth. They are just riddled with polluted ideas that you know, if you want to know what a school is looking for, talk to the school. Like, they're not, you know, doing magic. They're not, you know, they're not trying to fool you. The best way to understand their culture, their values, there's probably a mission statement right on the website is a great place to start, by the way. Talk to alumni, talk to current students, talk to more alumni and current students, really go deep. And, you know, the cliched ideas of what schools are looking for that are just regurgitated on those blogs like Reddit, I think result in some of the worst essays that schools have ever read, and they're so boring and cliche. It's like, so yes, you're going to hear them say the word authentic a lot, and they really mean it.
Yes, and
So
if I could just add to that, sorry, you reminded me. We strongly advise people to stay away from the sample essays out there. We joke internally, you can buy them by the pound, right? Because they don't do anything to encourage the creativity. And we don't want someone to see that and then get pigeonholed into thinking they have to write about, a particular thing. We don't want the cliched essay. There's the I look around my apartment essay. In this corner, I see a trophy. It reminds me of accomplishment. In this corner, I see, a picture of my dead grandmother. It reminds me of compassion. It's stay away from them. Exactly.
Yeah, don't stay away from stale. Stay away from cliche. Stay away from,
It's got to be unique to you.
Yeah.
Well, David, that was fantastic. By the way, next week, the episode we have coming up is also about AI. Even though that wasn't exactly the topic of today, it sort of turned into that. Maybe it's the AI working for itself. I don't know. But we're going to have an established author and artist to be on the show and talking about her experimentation with AI and how to stay authentic using that technology. But anyway, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was fantastic. That is
Eric and Bara.
All the time we have for today. So thank you for watching. If you stayed with us for this long, and if you liked today's episode, please give us a little thumbs up, say that you liked it, and subscribe to MBA Waves to stay on top of the latest trends and news in the world of MBAs, business, and education. And don't forget to check us out next week. As I just said, our whole schedule is on the website, mbawaves.com.